So we got a couple of Democrats who we were concerned were a little corporate, not as progressive as we wanted them to be. Now we wanted them to beat the monsters they were running against in the general elections. In the case of Northam in Virginia, he was running against Ed Gillespie, who used to run the Republican Party and then did a really ugly campaign, Gillespie did. So thrilled that he lost. Enormous relief that Roy Moore lost down in Alabama. But as I said on the night of Doug Jones' victory, it wasn't so much like, yay, Doug Jones is gonna change the world, as much as was just relief that we didn't elect someone as heinous as Roy Moore. So some people actually got on me. They're like, oh, you should be super excited about Doug Jones. All right, you get excited about whoever you like, okay? But you don't tell me who to get excited about. So what was my point of concern? My point of concern was the stories I'm about to tell you, that they weren't really progressive and that would create issues. So on Northam, he was very clear. Let's go to HuffPost for this story. Northam said that he would focus on governing in a bipartisan way and would not try to engineer a Democratic, this is after he wins, of course, don't get me wrong. Bipartisan way, would not try to engineer a Democratic advantage in Virginia House of Delegates, where Republicans currently hold a 1-seat majority. Now, so that's the least offensive part about what I'm about to tell you, but it's still really, really grating and annoying. So Virginia is kind of a purple state, and that's why we weren't exactly sure who was gonna win. Democrats have won it a lot lately, and they made up a lot of ground. That's why the Republicans only have 1 seat left, a 1-seat advantage left in their House of Delegates. But so if he says, I'm gonna run things in a bipartisan way, that's fairly normal talk after you win an election. I'm gonna represent everybody, so I have no problem with that. But when he says that he is not going to try to engineer a Democratic advantage in the state, I say, why not? You're the Democratic governor of Virginia. I'm pretty sure that if Gillespie had won, he would try to engineer an overwhelming Republican advantage in the state forever. That's what, and by the way, I wouldn't blame him for that. He's a Republican. You're supposed to be a Democrat, you're supposed to fight for us. But of course, right after the election, the surrender begins. Okay, but it's about to get much worse. Northam, a moderate Democrat, as they explain, who twice voted for George W. Bush in presidential elections, also told the Post he's concerned about the fiscal impact of Medicaid in his state. Wait a minute. Okay, wait a minute on two things. One, if you didn't know, yeah, Northam voted for Bush against Al Gore and against John Kerry. Northam, this so-called Democratic savior, thought George Bush nailed it in his first term and voted for him for his second term. So you shouldn't be surprised by any of this duplicity and lack of progressiveness, but the establishment thinks, oh, he's just our guy. But more importantly, the heart of this story, did you just say that he's worried about the fiscal impact of Medicaid? Wait a minute, I thought you spent the whole campaign fighting for Medicaid. That was part of the reason that you won, huge part of the reason. In fact, I don't just remember it, I still have the commercials. So this is the stuff he was saying during the campaign, watch.
Expanded Medicaid, so 400,000 hard-working Virginians, including 15,000 veterans who are serving our country, can get the health care they deserve. Every day we don't expand Medicaid, we lose $5 million to surrounding states that we're competing with. Now, if there's a business person out there who wants to give away $5 million a day to their competitors, I will tell you as a neurologist, they need their heads examined.
All right, excellent. They need their head examined if they're not going to expand Medicaid. Wonderful, okay. In fact, People for Bernie just tweeted out something, wait a minute. It says, here's Ralph Northam calling anyone who thinks Virginia shouldn't expand Medicaid needs their head examined, as you saw in the video for yourself. Today, he walked back this promise. Say it with me. Of course he did. He's a corporate conservative Democrat. He was never gonna expand Medicaid. That was just stuff he told you because he knows being progressive wins elections. After the elections, then you turn around to your donors and go, what would you like? Well, what do you need? voters. I already tricked them. I'm done with them. More from the Washington Post now. Northam said he has no plans to try to force Republicans to accept a broad expansion of Medicaid. Oh, God forbid you would force the other party to do anything. Instead, he has begun talks with lawmakers in both parties about overhauling the state's Medicaid system to expand access to health care while better defining eligibility to control costs. They're not going to expand Medicaid. The Republicans in Virginia aren't going to agree to that. When he says he's not going to go after the Republicans, instead he's going to agree with them, that means that he's focusing on the second half of that sentence. While better defining eligibility, meaning making sure that less people are eligible in order to, quote, control costs. He's going to cut it, not expand it. And then they tell us, like, wait, guys, what do you get all upset over, man? Just bow your heads and vote for corporate Democrats and send all your money and get all excited about them and are they ever going to deliver on policies? No, of course not. Just bow your heads already. So look, once he got to Gillespie, yes, he's way better than Gillespie. Yes, Gillespie's terrible. Okay, but that's why primaries matter. And so Perriello ran a good campaign against him. I wish he'd won, and he didn't. That's okay, it is what it is, but for God's sake, get out there and vote in the primaries. If you want progressives to represent you, then vote for progressives. And nowadays, with the Democratic establishment as it is, your only chances in the primaries. So they give all the advantages and all the money to their corporate guys. This one is so bad that even one of Hillary's top aides on her campaign was disgusted by it. Wow, you got to work extra hard to get Hillary people mad at you. So here's Brian Fallon tweeting, this is a cell phone in 3 steps. By the way, not a cell phone, a self-own, okay? 1, campaign on expanding Medicaid. 2, win sweeping victory. 3, voluntarily retreat from campaign promise. Well, Brian, you're absolutely right about that, and bless your heart for tweeting that. That about describes the entire Democratic establishment for the last 20 years, almost every time. So it is greatly disheartening. Okay, now that's Northam for you. And so of course he's not gonna do what he promised you. Instead he's gonna serve his donors. Now let's go to Doug Jones, the hero of Alabama. Now, I'm super glad he won because Roy Moore was the worst of the worst. I wish there was someone in Alabama that could have done a progressive challenge to him in the primaries. I believe that a progressive would have won easier, okay? I know that the Democratic establishment will never agree to that. Oh no, they need to be super conservative. But it doesn't matter. I loved it because at least Roy Jones took on a predator and defeated that predator, so that guy who was harassing young girls and women wouldn't be in office. So I know that he cares a lot about that issue, but what's weird is what he said right after he won. Let's watch.
Do you agree with Senator Booker that President Trump should resign because of these allegations?
You know, Jake, where I am on that right now is that those allegations were made before the election. And so people had an opportunity to judge before that election. I think we need to move on and not get distracted by those issues. Let's get on with the real issues that are facing people of this country right now. And I don't think that the president ought to resign at this point. We'll see how things go. There's other things out there, but I think at this point we need to move on and try to work with some real issues that are facing the country and not worry about getting at odds with the president any more than we have to.
Oh, no, you wouldn't want to get at odds with the president when you're in the opposite party. No, God forbid. Now, why don't you just bow your head to him? Great. We have a bold progressive senator from Alabama. Now that I won my campaign based on my opponent being a sexual predator, I'm done caring about the issue. So the president is also a sexual predator? Don't care, not my issue. Well, that's awfully convenient. Now, let's just be careful here. Does he have the same standard for everybody? Well, earlier this month, as HuffPost reports, Jones called on Senator Al Franken to resign over mounting groping allegations against him. But wait, you said that if the voters decide to elect someone, we're done with it. Franken was elected, and then but he's got to go. So you think the Democrats should resign? Okay, fair enough. But the Republican should not resign, because you want to talk about real issues. So when you were throwing Al Franken under a bus, maybe justifiably so, well, that helped your political career, and you were happy to do that, and you thought it was a real issue. When you were running against Roy Moore, you thought it was such a real issue, almost all your ads were about it. But now that you're safely ensconced in the Senate, or going to be, now all of a sudden, not a real issue. Funny how that works. We think it's a real issue. That's why we've got this petition going, tytnetwork.com/resign, that says now that Senator Al Franken has resigned for inappropriate behavior towards women, President Donald Trump must also resign for worse behavior toward women. Apparently, Doug Jones did not sign that petition because he's done caring about the issue. If you have progressives who are uncorrupted by corporate PAC money, they will serve you. If you have corporate Democrats, no matter what they promise you before an election, they will always serve the donor class. I'm not the bad guy for pointing that out. They're the bad guys for actually doing it. I'm only the messenger.